Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, what's going on, man? How are you?
Conrad is doing great. I'm being attacked by your man, Dave Silva. Other than that, I'm doing great.
Well, we are excited to be able to catch up with you. We apologize for being a little later than normal this morning, but man, John's making towns. How's it
Making towns. We were in Moline, Illinois, of all places, me and Ron Simmons. And so had to late fly in last night, so I had to get started a little bit late. I heard a lot of people came up and said they enjoyed the podcast, a ton of people. So hopefully that's indicative of something better, not just a few people that were trying to get something for free.
No, man, we've seen nothing but great feedback. I did want to ask you, what sort of feedback have you heard or has Ron heard about your Ron Simmons episode here?
Really good stuff. I think people enjoy a friendship story. And it's been nothing but positive. Of course, because Conrad, I've blocked everybody who says anything negative. So I don't know if there's negative feedback or not because everybody's blocked.
Yeah, I'm getting one after another requests for people to, hey, can you ask John to unblock me? Well, I don't know.
Hey, Connor, what's funny is somebody will say something to me like at a show or something, said, yeah, you blocked me. I'm not sure why. I said, you must have said something. And then you can see them. And they know they said something, and they're like, yeah. Something happened.
I love it. Well, something did happen over the weekend. We were given the Iggy on some big news for your great close personal friend, Mr. Ron Simmons, and I wanted you to be the first to see. Take a look.
The George Tragos and Lou Thez Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, located in Waterloo, Iowa, showcasing the history and legacy of the sport and honoring those who made an impact on professional wrestling. Hall of Fame Board President Jerry Briscoe is proud to announce that Ron Simmons is receiving the 2025 Frank Gotch Award from the George Tragos Lou Thez Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. The Frank Gotch Award is given to a wrestler who, through their athleticism and toughness in the ring, brought a higher level of respect to professional wrestling from both inside and outside the business.
My name is Ron Simmons. I'm from Warner Robins, Georgia. I play middle guard, 6'1", 238.
Ron Simmons first burst onto the national spotlight as a member of the Florida State football team, where he twice earned All-American honors and finished 9th in the 1979 Heisman Trophy voting. He was voted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2008. After a career in professional football, Simmons then began training for the Squared Circle in the Championship Wrestling from Florida promotion.
I mean goodness, I'm in this profession to do the best I can to stay.
He moved on to Jim Crockett Promotions and World Championship Wrestling, where in 1992 he became the first African American to win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship.
He has realized his dream to become the best in the world.
Simmons would continue his career with stints in ECW and New Japan before moving on to WWE in 1996 under the name Farouk. He formed the Nation of Domination, mentoring members like The Rock and Mark Henry early in their careers. Simmons would eventually wrestle under his real name again, as he would team with JBL as the APA. As tough as they come, the two drank beer, smoked cigars, and raised a lot of hell while winning the World Tag Team titles 3 times between 1999 and 2001. Simmons would be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2012, and it's always a treat when he pops back up on WWE programming to deliver his signature catchphrase. Ron Simmons, the 2025 Frank Gotch Award winner for the George Tragos Lou Thez Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
How about it, man? What a cool announcement. Congratulations, Mr. Simmons. And man, that just gets me excited for the TNT Hall of Fame this summer. How about you, John?
Yeah, me too. What a great video. I mean, Ron is he's such a good guy. He's the best guy I've ever met. Just a wonderful human being. He's been meant so much to so many people. Like I said last week, he takes his role as a mentor very serious about how he mentors people and talks to people. It's just, I was with him all weekend. And a lot of times I don't do many autograph sessions. The only way to get me to go is like, Ron's here. And I got wherever he is, I'll go. I like hanging out with Ron. So I spent the weekend with Ron this past weekend, and he was telling me how much this meant to him to go to this Hall of Fame. He also thinks a lot of Gerald Briscoe, who called him and said, "Hey, we want you to take this Frank Gotch Award," which is a huge award. And so Ron's very excited about it.
Check it out. It's going down in Waterloo, Iowa this summer. John's going to be there. I'm going to be there. And now we know Ron Simmons is going to be there. Congratulations again to Mr. Ron Simmons on being the latest inductee with the Frank Gotch Award Our topic today is something I would have loved to have heard from Mr. Simmons, what he thought about it. The infamous brawl for all. In your real life, John, how often does this come up? Like when you're at a meet and greet, you're at an appearance. Is the brawl for all still a topic you hear about when you're making appearances in 2024?
No, not really. Not really. Plus I lost dramatically in the finals. So people, which by the way, your freaking social media people put out something on social media. They don't put the 3 fights I win. They put me getting knocked out by Bart Gunn. So I think that's Dave Silva. It's not Dave Silva. Dave's too nice for that. So I don't know if don't hear it from that, or people just, they want to talk about other stuff. Now, nearly every podcast I do, which I don't do very many, it's almost always brought up.
I do want to ask, Bob Holly wrote in his book, Jim Ross, who was in charge of talent, had been lobbying to bring his buddy Steve in for a long time, but creative didn't know how to do it. Steve had wrestled in Japan for the majority of his career and had a reputation as a genuine badass. So they figured they would introduce him in the brawl for all. He'd walk through everybody and boom, they'd have a credible guy they could leapfrog over everybody to put up against Austin in the main events. Everybody backstage thought it was a bunch of bullshit. JR was shoving Steve down everyone's throats, saying he was going to destroy everybody. Nobody had a problem with Steve before, but JR was putting him over so often that the boys resented him and hoped he'd get knocked out. So before we talk about the creation of Brawl for All, do you remember there being chatter about Dr. Death and his relationship with JR in the locker room, or is this just sour grapes from Bob Holly?
No, I don't think it's sour grapes. I can't speak for Bob, so I certainly can't read Bob's mind. Bob and I, we're pretty good friends. I assume we still are. I haven't seen Bob in, good Lord, 20 years. I'd love to see him because we work so many matches together. But Doc had this great relationship with JR, and JR did want him to come in. And I don't know how much resentment there was. It's kind of JR's boy, and anytime you have somebody who's somebody's boy that's coming in that's the boss, you kind of hope something happens that doesn't go real well for it just because there's a little bit of nepotism there. With Doc, I don't know if that was the case or not, because Doc was a badass. I mean, Doc was one of the toughest guys that's been in his business history, and he had such an incredible career in Japan. He had such an incredible career for Watts. I mean, Doc was a good guy too. People really like Doc now, but there was a little pushback. Bob is correct. I don't know how much of that's correct. Bob's speaking obviously from his perspective, and I don't know how much of that is correct. As far as there was a lot of pushback because of the association with JR. We did assume he was JR's boy. There's not 100% the case.
I wanted to ask about a story that Vince Russo has told on the 2-man Power Trip of Wrestling podcast a couple of years ago. He said something like, I remember, bro, it was me, Bradshaw, and I'm almost positive Kevin Kelly was the third person there. And bro, Bradshaw had made this statement with a big smile on his face. He meant it 100%. And he basically said, if this shit were real, I would kick everybody's ass in the locker room. And when he said it, bro, I kind of like snickered because my kind of went through a quick catalog of who all was in that locker room. And I'm kind of saying to myself, bro, that's really easy to say. Anybody could say that. Anybody could make that claim. But backing that up is something that would be totally different. There were the thoughts that ran through my head when Bradshaw made that statement. And I knew JBL wasn't going to miss it, going to win it. I knew Bradshaw. And bro, listen, with all due respect, I'm a New Yorker. Bradshaw's one of those Texas guys. Okay, bro? I'm sorry, bro. But he came across as a big mouth Texan who was full of shit. And bro, as soon as those words came out of his mouth, I knew in my mind, bro, no, you couldn't beat everybody up in the locker room. Bro, no, you're not as tough as the front you're putting on. I did not believe for 1 second. And then, bro, especially when I started seeing Bart knock people out, I'm like, bro, you're not going to beat them. Never, bro. Never did I think he was going to win. So it's almost insinuated create the brawl for all just with your braggadociousness. And he said, well, fuck it. Let's just do it. Let's find out. Let's see how
it wasn't insinuated. He said he created it for me. And was there really that many bros in that thing?
Yes. I read all the bros.
He says bro that many times.
Roll Tide. Yes, sir.
Oh my God. I told you last week, he hated, he said the Texas thing. He hated that thing. He tried to get me to talk without a Southern accent. Ed Farrar sat down with me, tried to teach me because he thought anybody talked with a Southern accent sounded stupid. And so he didn't want to let me do any promos. We used to go out there on live TV and he'd give us promos. Ron would do one line and then hand me the microphone because Russo didn't want me to talk because he hated Southern accents. I guess he hated JR and Stone Cold too. I have no idea. But there was this bias against the South, because he's a New Yorker. I mean, you can read it in his statement. As far as that being true, that's 100% bullshit. He said that for years. Nobody at that time thought that was true. Talk to Bruce, talk to Bob Holly, talk to Butterbean. No one at that time thought that was true. Now, if it was true, Conrad, first of all, let's address the statement. Okay, there's so much that's in this. There's so much that's in this, bro, that we got to talk about, bro. So the statement itself, we had 2 UFC champions in our dressing room. So there's, if I'm saying I can whip the whole world, I don't doubt I said it. We said all kinds of crazy stuff back then. We loved to talk smack. We loved to talk shit in the dressing room. Shamrock sitting right there. There's no way I'm meaning something like that. You got Undertaker, you got Godfather, you got the Harris Boys, you got Blackman, you got Bob Holly. We didn't know Bart could knock out the entire world, but we knew Bart was a tough guy. So none of that as far as being real, no, good Lord, no. I think what happened, Conrad, is that Russo left and went to WCW. And after he left WWE, WWE went through the roof. WCW goes bankrupt, and he spent the next 25 years of his life in. There's nothing else you can say but abysmal failure. I mean, nothing he's touched is still around. Everything he's touched has gone either bankrupt or gone under. He's not welcome back at any place he has been. And so what my thought is that he came up with this idea of the Brawl for All, like he came up with Viagra on a pole match and Judy Bagwell on a pole match and Dave Arquette to be champion. He came up with one of the worst ideas in the history of wrestling. He's done it consistently. And eventually he just said, I'm going to blame it all on Bradshaw. So, I did that just to get Bradshaw. And so that's what I think. Nobody at the time thought that was the case. And I don't think anybody now really thinks that's the case. Russo, he makes Bobby Jaggers look truthful. The guy can't tell the truth. So no, that to me is 100% preposterous.
It also,
I will tell you this though. I will tell you this: if Russo did this for me, I'd never had a home, and I've told you this before. I'd never owned a home. I'd worked a lot of places, didn't have much money. That Brawl for All, I was in 3 fights. The judges says I won. Whether I did or not, the judges said it. They're my friends. I'm 3 tough guys. Made it to the final, so I made $5,000 a fight. I made $25,000 my losing share of the final match with Bart. So that $40,000 I took down to the bank, and my house was $84,600. So I bought a house, put almost half of it down because of the Brawl for All. It was one of the best things ever happened to me. I had that house for 20 years. When Russo was going bankrupt in these different companies, when I was winning WWE Championship and going to the Hall of Fame, I still had that house. So he got me.
I had no idea you had a little Russo heat on you.
He's this for years. Russo has been trying to make a living off saying stuff about me, and I've never said anything about him. I've never talked about the guy.
No, never have I. Even in mine and your private offline conversations, he's never come up, not one time.
No, so. I don't bring him up. I don't bash him in public. He just says he said this. He goes on the dark side of the ring and makes all this up. It was so bad. Godfather called me and said, "Hey man, you won't believe this. What has Russo got against you?" Godfather never heard any of that. And he called me and told me the whole thing that, Russo had said. He tried to make this whole spiel and make me out to be the bad guy, and cover up for his failure. And so I don't know. I guess it's his way of dealing with it.
It is interesting, though, because I kind of view, you say, allegedly, if you were saying, oh, I could beat everybody up. That's just the way guys talk. Like, guys are just busting balls. Like,
exactly.
I mean, I don't know how many of you listening to this understand what I'm saying, but that's just like bar talk, locker room talk, car talk. Just guys are talking shit. I'm the best at everything. We don't really mean it. It's just what we do to bust balls.
I used to say stuff to Shamrock all the time. Don't even try that shooting stuff on me, boy. That ain't gonna work. I know it'd work. He won the UFC when there were no rules.
Yeah,
guys love talking smack. Guys love saying they're the toughest guy in the world. Russo's not one of the guys. He owns some little video store or something, so he's not one of the guys. You can tell by the way he talks, bro.
The idea that you hear that though, and then you take it literally, like, come on, man, he's just kidding around. I do want to ask about Steve Blackman though. Bob Holly wrote in his book when I guess there was a meeting about the rules. He said something like, so that means if I want to take somebody's knee out with a kick, I can do it, right? And then they decided, okay, maybe we do need some rules. Here's what Bob wrote. I think they got worried that Steve might kill people. And you know what? He probably could have. There's nobody more dangerous than Steve Blackman, period. He knows every element of the fighting game. He's strong. He's smart. He's lightning quick. He's a well-rounded fighter. Unfortunately for him, and fortunately for the rest of us, Steve hurt himself training against a 300-pound guy who rolled on Steve's leg and blew out his knee. But if that hadn't happened, Steve would have won the whole thing, hands down. What do you make of that note from Bob Holly?
True. 100% true. Yeah, Steve was a badass, and he was training to fight me. That's why he's training against a 300-pound guy. And thank God that he got hurt for me, because he had every skill there was. He was better than me, and he was better than me in takedowns. He's better than me in striking. That'd have been a long day for me. I mean, Steve was in the kick that Bob's talking about. Vince was going to have no rules, and so Steve said, "Can we leg kick them or take their leg out, kind of a leg sweep?" And Vince goes, "Yeah." And then Steve, thank God, he demonstrated it. And it was so freaking violent. We're all like, dude, he's going to break every leg he kicks. It was unbelievable, the violence of that kick. And we're like, you can't allow that. We're guys who've been in bar fights. We're, maybe with Shamrock and Severn you could do that, but not with us. And so Vince, like, oh my God, he'll kill somebody. So he started making some rules. But yeah, that's true. That story's true. Steve probably, I don't know if Steve would have won it. He probably I say only reason I say he might not would have won it was because Shamrock and Severn were in it to begin with. And those guys were UFC champions. They were trained fighters also. But Steve was by far the best trained fighter in the tournament.
I've got to ask you about a Steve Blackman story that Bruce has told us before. But before we do, I want to remind everybody that if you're looking for some stiff shots on your own, how about Blue Chew? Hey, so in talking to Bruce, he told us a story. And maybe occasionally Bruce doesn't let the truth get in the way of a good story. So now that we've got the horse's mouth here, so to speak, did you ever have any fun incidents with Steve Blackman? Maybe
I don't call it fun. We got into a fight about 9 o'clock in the morning at Kansas City airport baggage claim. Yeah, we sure did. Yeah. And what happened is Steve had migraine headaches. And I think this is what led up to it, because there were a couple of guys that you would know very well that were huge Hall of Famers that had messed with Steve on the flight. And Steve was trying to sleep. They didn't tell me Steve was in a horrible mood. They said, hey, go mess with Steve. And so I just thought he was having a bad day or something. I didn't realize that, how bad it was. So they had kept him awake or something like that and kept him up on the flight. He had these migraine headaches and he was in a terrible mood. I didn't know that. They were setting me up, and which I would have done to somebody else, but it was happened to be me. So Steve was sitting there in like shorts or something. I walked up and I pinched him on the butt and I said, "You look nice in them shorts there, boy." Doing the old deliberate thing, and again, guys will take that out of context and make all kinds of things of it. That guys did stupid stuff like that back then. We didn't have the internet. We were bored. Steve backhands me and hits me about 6 or 7 times before I can freaking move. I mean, it's just I'm like a freaking punching dummy. He's like bam, 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 bam. I'm like, oh my God. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden I realize I'm in a freaking fight. And thank God in the middle of it, he steps back to kick me, that being like kick we talked about, and he stuck his foot into a bag at baggage claim. Thank God he'd have broke whatever he kicked. And so then we get into a pretty good scuffle. We end up on top of the moving carousel on top of this like 60 or 70-year-old guy. And Shamrock was on the phone. He's the one that came over and broke it up. And so yeah, we had a pretty good kerfuffle. Thank God he stepped in that bag. I don't know what he'd have done, but it wouldn't have ended up well for me. And, I felt bad about it because, it was my fault. I deserved every bit of it. I shouldn't have been messing with him. I didn't realize he's having such a bad day. Steve and I were friends. I'd done stuff like that 100 times. Whatever it was, it was wrong that day. And, shit happens.
It tickles me because we never had the context that other people had been ribbing him the entire time, getting him ready for you. So in a weird way, although they had been ribbing Steve Blackman, this became a rib on you. They knew what would happen. You did not.
100%. Yeah. If I can't tell who it is. It's 2 Hall of Famers that were ribbing him, and they set me up so good. And I'd have done that to somebody else. I'd have thought it's just as funny as they probably thought it was too when we started fighting and ended up on baggage claim. But yeah, Steve was having a bad day. These guys are messing with him. And I walked up right at the wrong freaking time and did the wrong thing at the right time and ended up paying the price. That was the day, by the way. So they pulled us in. So one thing Bruce is wrong about, and I don't think Bruce is lying. So I'm not saying that he is. I'm certainly not. People conflate stories. Bruce did talk to me that day. And I did tell him the quote, I didn't even know I was in a fight, Mr. Pritchard, till he hit me 9 times. That's true. 100% that's true. But Bruce didn't find me that day. JR find me that day. So, JR pulled us aside. And he's like, you got a cigarette. He goes, hey, I'd rather somebody fire me than find me. And I said, I wouldn't. If you fire me, I can't pay the fucking fine. I'm like, what? That's the dumbest comment I ever heard. Don't fire me, find me. I can pay that if I've got a job. And that day was the day that Owen Hart died. That night.
Oh wow!
Yep, sure was.
I didn't realize it was the same day. Man,
same day. Yeah, it was in Kansas City that day, and that's the day. Unfortunately, that Owen Hart passed away. And Steve and I were good friends. We were good friends after that. It just shit happens.
Isn't it interesting though that when these stories get out there becomes a narrative? I don't think the rest of the wrestling world knew. That was a rib on you. You were set up to get punched and kicked at baggage claim. And
yeah,
I don't know. I like having,
and I had messed with Steve a bunch of times because we I that's what we did. That's what I did too, and so it wasn't just, but yes, 100% you're right. Steve was in a bad mood because some guys had been messing with him on the plane. I went up at the wrong time and I ended up paying the price. And I told him afterwards, I said, Steve, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, set you over the edge, which I didn't. I was just having some fun.
I love Bruce's impression of you as he tells the story. Mr. Pritchard, he hit me so fast.
But Bruce telling us that part is 100% true. Now, Bruce didn't find me, but the height part is 100% true. I'd never been hit that fast in my life. I mean, that guy can fight. I mean, he can fight. I mean, he was hitting me. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And it's like 9:00 in the morning, and he's hitting me, and it's hard. He's hitting me hard too. Like, holy shit! I'm freaking fighting Chuck Norris here. This guy can go.
So tell me a little bit about what you guys are told about the rules and just the tone and tenor of the locker room. There was a lot of speculation that, Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn came to the WWF to not do this, and maybe it wasn't going to be as fruitful for them. They may have made more money with that sort of thing in the UFC and not in the confines of a WWE ring. But there's lots of speculation. Hey, is this? I remember at the time people thinking, well, even though they're saying this is going to be a shoot, they're going to work it because they would never do an actual shoot inside a WWF wrestling ring. There's athletic commissions in every state. And there's a whole host of reasons. Did you guys have any suspicion that this might, even though they're saying this is going to be a shoot, they're going to find a way to turn it into a work? Or what was
Vince reserved the right. When he told us the very first day that he went over all the rules, he reserved the right. He said, I reserve the right to cheat. And, he was very clear with it. If they wanted something else to happen, they were clear that he reserved the right. Now, as far as I know, none of that happened. But Vince, reserved the right that if something goes sideways with this, which you never know what's going to happen. You got to shoot. You can't program this. Bruce called me the like Thursday before the first fight on Monday, and gave me a call. Is how he told me about all the whole thing. And he said, "You want to be in a shoot fight on Monday?" I said, "Why?" I said, "Why would I be in a shoot fight on Monday?" And he goes, "We're going to do a shoot fighting tournament." I said, "That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard." And I said, at the time, everybody thought it was for Doc. Everybody, this stuff with Russo came up later, which, I think was manufactured out of thin air to cover up for, one of his horrible ideas. But everybody thought it was for Doc. And I said, "Bruce, Doc is older." I said, "He's not the same Doc that he was when he was 28. When he was 28, he probably wins the thing." And I said, "He's had concussions. He's had issues. He's had all these stiff matches in Japan." I said, "Doc's not going to win this thing." I said, "A guy like Bob Holly is going to win this thing." And, no one knew that Bart could hit like he did. Bart had won a bunch of tough man contests. Nobody, people knew Bart was a tough guy, but nobody knew that he had a freaking punch like George Foreman. And so then I asked Bruce, I said, "Is Shamrock I said, "Are the Shooter Boys in it? Shamrock and Severn?" He goes, "Yeah, they're in it." I said, "Well, can you put them in just at least my second fight where I could have a chance of winning one before I get beat by a freaking UFC champion?" And he goes, No, it's a blind draw. It's a blind draw. which is listen, I love Bruce. You love Bruce. Dave Sybil loves Bruce. We're the only ones that do other than Gerald Briscoe. But we three love Bruce. This is not true. I told Bruce, I said, you're going to put me out there against Henry Godwin. I said, I know you are. Because they wanted years ago, about a year before, they called this double clothesline spot because they wanted to see a car wreck with me and Henry. Henry's this, huge, big, tough guy, and I was this big cowboy. So they wanted to see us run into each other. I said, I know you want to see me fight Henry. He goes, no, it's a shoot. It's a blind draw. I said, no way. I got there Monday. I'm fighting Henry Godwin, just like I called. Bart was fighting Bob Holly, his tag team partner. Draws was fighting Hawk, his tag team partner. Merrill and Blackman, the two good shooters, as far as boxing, and Blackman was a great shooter, end up fighting each other. No way that was a blind draw. That was a complete work.
It is interesting to me to see how this all went down with the benefit of hindsight, because they don't show us any sort of bracketing, but we do get, as you mentioned, Mark Merrow and Steve Blackman first. And Steve Blackman looked pretty good at the time. His ability to understand how to mix up punches and takedowns. We never really got a chance to see much of the Golden Gloves that we'd always heard about with Mark Merrow. I'm not doubting the accolade. I'm just saying this is a unique circumstance for everyone. The fight that you had with Mr. Godwin, the real-life Mark Canterbury, in round 1 felt more like a tough man competition. Is that the way that you felt about it at the time?
100%. I don't even know. I don't think I'd ever put on a pair of boxing gloves. I don't know if Henry had either. Henry Godwin, I always call him Henry, not Mark, and still do to this day. Henry's one of my best friends and still is. And neither one of us, I don't know if Henry had ever put on gloves, been in a ring, anything. We're putting on gloves in the middle of the day, and we're sitting there hitting each other in the head with these gloves. We're having fun, and people are going, guys, take it serious. Vince goes, no, do whatever you want to do. Vince thought it was entertaining. If we go out there and are laughing and joking, but fighting for real, Vince thought it'd be entertaining. And that's, we were going to fight for real. We had no issue fighting each other. I didn't want to fight Henry, but yeah, of course, that's what it felt like. We weren't trained fighters. We were two big, tough guys that didn't mind hitting each other really hard in the head. And so, yeah, that's exactly what it looked like.
When you take a look at what we're seeing at somethingtowrestle.com, you see they've got, a way to hold all 3 ropes together like you do in boxing. The turnbuckles have like a boxing pad in the corners. The guys are wearing... Well, I mean, it looks like you're just wearing your wrestling gear with boxing gloves. It looks like Mr. Henry's wearing, some Jordans and some a t-shirt and sweatpants. I mean, this isn't he's not in his character outfit. You're in yours. I mean, this does feel like an early UFC where it's like, man, we don't really know what to expect, but here we go. But when you find yourself out there wearing boxing gloves for the first time and you hear the crowd chanting boring and we want wrestling, are you asking yourself, what the hell are we doing? Or are you just trying to get through it?
Just trying to get through it. And I didn't hear the boring and the we want wrestling. I didn't hear that, and I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I didn't hear any of those. I think people were kind of shocked at what they were watching and why they were watching it. But I didn't hear any of those chants. Now, I'm not saying they didn't happen. I'm in a boxing match for the first time in my life, so I'm not paying much attention to the crowd. I did stand up at the end. I did in one break. I had some blood in my mouth, and I remember I could see myself on the hard cam, and I did kind of put my mouthpiece out a little bit to show all the blood. I was working that, obviously. Kind of play to the crowd, and I didn't want to sit down, and so there were a lot of things, like that. But as far as just being a shoot, I was just trying to fight, and Henry was doing the same. We didn't, we've been in a million fights. We hadn't two things that we hadn't done. I don't think we've been in a fight sober. And we hadn't been in a fight with boxing gloves. So that was 2 things that were new to us. When I got the call from Bruce, I don't even know if I'd ever put on a pair of boxing gloves. And so I went to a gym in South Dallas, this boxer there, and I went in and I said, hey, I'm in a fight Monday. I said, what do I do? He goes, don't train, just hit the heavy bag. So he put on some gloves on me and hit the heavy. I think he put gloves on me. I had the small gloves, hit a heavy bag, for a couple of days just to get used to punching something, and then went to the fight with Henry. And one thing we did was, Henry and I, because of the fight with Merrow and Blackman, that was not that good because Merrow didn't know anything about takedowns.
Right.
Merrow was, I tried to look up on the internet before. It says he's a 3-time Golden Glove champion. I've seen 2-time. I've seen 4-time champion. Mark Merrow was a legit high-level amateur boxer. A Golden Glove, New York champion, and he had knocked out one of Tyson's opponents. I don't know if it was Riddick Bowe or Razor Ruddock. At least that was the myth that, at the time that he had. And I think that's true. Merrill was a really good boxer, but he didn't know anything about takedowns. You could see it in there. And Blackman wasn't going to get hit. There was no reason to. Blackman would throw the punch, he'd take the takedown, he'd fake the punch, do the takedown, fake the takedown, throw the punch. Blackman, it was a really trained fighter. And Merrill just didn't know what to do. And so before we went out, me and Henry both said, hey, listen, no takedowns. Let's just fight, hit each other in the head a bunch of times and try to get the crowd in. Now, Henry double crossed me like the second round or something and took me down. So that's how the bastard, which I thought was funny. We're friends. We are to this day. I loved it. I'll tell you something else about, you can't get it passed with the state commissions. Henry had a broken neck.
Oh,
Henry Godwin had a broken neck. The Road Warriors dropped him on his freaking bean and broke his neck. He shouldn't have been in that fight. That was incredibly dangerous. And that big, tough bastard never said a word, went and got in the fight. He asked me afterwards, we hugged right before the fight. We hugged right after the fight. And he goes, man, is your neck bothering you? And mine wasn't, but I don't have a broken neck. He said, man, my neck's bothering me. And he had a freaking broken neck. And he should have never been out there.
I've always wanted to ask somebody about that. Do you remember there being challenges with the different athletic commissions, or did they all just assume, well, since it's in the WWE, it's just sports entertainment?
The Pirate had one eye. Carl had one eye.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't put a guy with one eye out there. Carl is a tough dude. PCO, who's in
TNA.
In TNA, wonderful guy, tough guy. I mean, Carl's a tough dude, man. We always called him the Pirate, because that was his gimmick. He had the one patch because he had a fake eye. You can't get past with a boxing commission with one eye. I don't even know why how do you put somebody out there like that? I mean, if this is Russo's idea, I mean, what the fuck are you doing? And also we're sitting there like, hey, listen, we know Dr. Death's tough, but you're going to put him out there with a one-eye guy. It's like you're trying to fix this thing. And Carl, by the way, did a great job. There was a debate whether he actually won the fight with Doc or not. I don't know. The judges, ruled against it. But, that was, I don't know. But it's crazy, the fact Savio had a bad neck. I mean, you had so many guys that could have never passed a boxing test.
So clearly these different athletic commissions, they just assumed it's
those guys are idiots. You know them, Conrad. Those guys are buffoons. All they want their money. We used to work in Maryland. We'd pay them between $34,000 and $38,000 for a live event. They'd show up, take your blood pressure. It could be 200 over 180, and they wouldn't care. They'd pass you just because all they want is their money. They're scam artists. That's all they are. They're what's left over from the mafia. And that's why Vince wanted to get rid of them in the mid-'80s and said wrestling's a work, it's scripted, to get rid of these athletic commissions because they're nothing but leeches and mooches, and they don't do anything for these young fighters, which they're supposed to. That's what they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to do stuff for WWE guys. We have medical and people are taken care of, especially now. It's a complete different world. This is, and again, comparing us to then, I say us, comparing WWE to us back then, that's like comparing the NFL and North Dallas 40. There's no comparison. It was a different world. We didn't have all these trainers. We didn't have all these concussion tests, and we didn't know what concussions were, much less anything else. And so when you had these commissions come in, they're supposed to be helping. They didn't help nothing. They just stole money from us.
I've heard from people who are in WWE now, some pretty big stars through the years, who would say that, hey, the athletic commission would show up because they were just looking for pictures and autographs.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you take this picture with my kid and, will you autograph this for my son or whatever. But it was less about, fighter safety or performer safety and more about, hey, we're going to get some access and the big show's in town and we want some pictures and we'll take some tickets and we'll get paid for being here.
Yeah, that's 100% what it was. And there were most of them were pretty good guys. I mean, I say pretty good guys. They knew what the gimmick was. Like in New York, those guys had been there since Ali and Frazier. It was pretty cool to talk to them. Because they had been with all the boxing fights. It was really cool to talk to them. They wanted to talk to us, because like you say, they wanted to get some, pictures and stuff like that. But we wanted to talk to them because we wanted to hear about Muhammad Ali. We wanted to hear about Foreman. We want to hear about Frazier. We want to hear about the big fights. We wanted to talk to them about stuff too. They were a lot of fun. Now, like I say, the one in Maryland, it's completely different now, by the way. I did a show the other day in Maryland, and the guys were just wonderful. The commission guys. I'm not the old guys. I'm talking about 30 years ago. Those guys were buffoons, and they were in a lot of different places around the country.
So, John, I wanted to ask you, there's some other performers in here we don't really talk about that much. You mentioned Savio Vega in the first round. He's going to take apart Brockus.
Yeah.
We used to see these promos for Brockus on WWF TV, and eventually we saw him. He did go work with Paul Heyman a bit in ECW, but he had a great bodybuilder look. It felt like he caught no momentum. What do you remember of Brockus, and what do you remember about him being dismantled rather quickly by Savio?
Well, I remember Brockus. I believe it was a Shane McMahon thing, I think. And I don't want to give Shane credit for something that was not, what Shane did. But I think it was Shane McMahon that brought Brockus. I think, Shane would find guys different places. Brockus had this huge bodybuilding resume. I mean, he was a great bodybuilder. And they brought him in. They brought him at the wrong time. They brought him in and put him in this tournament. They don't know if the guy can fight or not. I mean, what a terrible thing to do. You got this great bodybuilder, and he was a great bodybuilder. He was a world-class bodybuilder. And all of a sudden you put him in this shoot fight tournament. And from what I understand, I didn't know Brockus that well. He wasn't even sure if it was a shoot or not. And now right before he walked out, obviously he knew it was, but he's out there with Savio, who's a really tough guy, martial arts guy, and Savio also had this bad neck, should have never been out there. This kind of ended a lot of Savio's career because of the punches and because he had the bad neck to start with. But Brockus was something that they were trying to work with. And, this just kind of killed him. You put a guy out there in a shoot fight and you don't know what's going to happen. It was just stupid. I mean, the whole thing was stupid. I mean, I didn't mind doing it. The guys that were in it had fun. I had fun in it, by the way. I had a great time. It was fun training. I trained my ass off. I'll tell you the story, training to fight Merrill in a minute. But I trained in the Lions Den in Dallas with Guy Mesger, who was a 4-time kickboxing world champion. Wonderful guy. Still got a training gym. I just looked it up on the internet in Dallas. Shamrock hooked me up with I enjoyed every bit of it. The guys loved it. It just didn't make any sense, because if this is the tough guy contest, why is the biggest draw in the history of wrestling the tough guy Rattlesnake? Why is he not in it? It doesn't make any sense. So is this just the tough guys that aren't in the main event? I mean, is that what it is? Or is this the real tough guys? It didn't make any sense why Undertaker wasn't in it, why Rock wasn't in it, or Triple H wasn't in it. There was a reason, obviously. They were the main event guys. You're not going to put them in this. And, I'll tell you interesting stories, Connor, and I don't know how this ever played out. Right before this happened, they wanted to pitch some ideas. We were losing badly to WCW, and Vince was wanting to change some stuff. So he asked for feedback for the guys. My feedback was, let's create basically the hardcore division with all these tough guys. So I always wondered if this was part of the impetus for it. Russo claimed something completely different, which, I told you, I don't think there's any truth to that, just like there's nothing truth to anything else Russo says. But it was a hardcore division, which they ended up creating afterwards. But all these guys submitted ideas. So I had no idea. I always, at the time, thought maybe that's where they got the idea to make it into a shoot.
I do want to ask you about the actual matches themselves. I know that, we don't know exactly how these brackets are going to shake out. But when you see Draws is going to be fighting Road Warrior Hawk, when they've been in a Road Warrior storyline, you had to think, come on now, this ain't a blind draw. Like, this is 100% planned, right?
Bruce claims it wasn't. Bruce to this day will claim it isn't. I'm Conrad, I'm on your side. It's preposterous to believe that this thing was a blind draw. Bob Holly was tag team partners with Bart Gunn, who ended up in a fight with him first. I just refuse to believe this thing was a blind draw. Bruce says it was, though, and I'm not going to call Bruce a liar, but I don't believe it.
Do you think, we know that, Brockus never really gains any momentum in the WWF, and this is probably the swan song for even that possibility. But I've always felt like in an alternate universe, Mark Mero got dealt a pretty bad hand. I mean, this is a guy who was a Golden Gloves boxer. This is a guy who is now a motivational speaker. And, oh, by the way, the guy can sell, because we've all seen Sable. So I'm just saying, he looks like $1 million, and he's got this great amateur background, and we know he can talk and he can communicate. It does feel like in an alternate universe, he would have been a much bigger star. And it gives him some credit. Think about that background where you are this Golden Gloves boxer. You're a legit badass,
Yep.
But you can also portray this more flamboyant character like Johnny B. Bad. You got to spend some time with Mark Mero. Do you think that in the end, the Brawl for All really hurt him too? Because if nothing else, we had all heard, oh, he's this fabulous boxer. And we never really got to see that in the Brawl for All. Did it hurt him long term, do you think?
Yeah, I think it did. And let me first address Brockus, and I'll go straight to Mero. I had an idea to bring in Gustl Smeasel from Europe, and Gustl, I think, would have been. I mean, he would have been a Hall of Fame star for WWE. He was a European strongman. He was a judo champion. He looked fantastic. And when they brought in Brockus, they wanted somebody from Germany because Germany was one of our biggest countries at the time. The countries that we did well in was because we had TV deals that were better. So it fluctuated. That's why at times they go to France and do really well. Then at times they go to Italy and do well. It's because the TV deals are better, depending on contracts. We had a great contract in Germany and Austria at the time, and they really wanted a German star. And that's the reason they brought in Brockus. I was pushing for Gustl Smeasel, but they didn't want to bring in two. And I really hate that because I've always thought Gustl Smeasel would have been a magnificent star. He was a great worker. He was a good worker. He was a great character. He was a great shooter, European strongman. I thought he would have done really well, and thank God he wasn't in the brawl for all, because that guy would have knocked. They've been carrying him off like cordwood. I thought it hurt Brockus, and I thought it hurt Mero too. I mean, here's a guy with a legit resume. I mean, he is. It's hard to win the Golden Glove tournament, and he's training with Ray Rinaldi, a great pro boxing trainer. To go pro, he was going to be a pro boxer, and something ended up happening with a facial injury, a nose injury, or something that derailed his boxing career. And then he gets down to WCW, and I believe it was Dusty figured out what he did well. And he did that Johnny B. Bad really well. I mean, he was really over. Mark was, I believe, and I've asked Gerald about this, Briscoe, was the first guaranteed contract that they gave away to somebody from WWE did, and was to Mero. They really thought he could be the guy. The problem was, without Dusty there, the gimmick didn't work as well. And I believe it was Dusty, the one that did the gimmick. And I think the Brawl for All hurt him too. He was out there with Blackman. And if it had been a straight boxing match, that'd have been a hell of a boxing match. Those guys could both throw. That'd have been a hell of a boxing match. If it had been a hell of a boxing match with me, he wins that thing 10 times out of 10 with me. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I can say before the fight, because I trained my ass off for that fight. And we'll go into that in a second. But Mero, to me, I think they really missed the boat with him because of the Brawl for All. And Mero, he's this great boxer, and he doesn't win what is perceived as a boxing tournament. Now, he didn't lose because of the boxing. He lost because of the wrestling, because it was a hybrid tournament. But I think that really did hurt him.
It is a shame and one of those great what ifs, because I do think he could have had a much bigger upside. The story has always been maybe Mero didn't enjoy more success in the WWF because Vince thought he was hiring the Johnny B. Bad character, but of course that was a WCW creation. We do see this evolution from Wildman Mark Mero to Marvelous Mark Mero. So instead of having the animal print and all that, he's wearing boxing trunks. I think that could have worked in an alternate universe. I think Marvelous Mark Mero and leaning into the boxing background that we had all heard about for so long really would have worked. Unfortunately, we never really got to see that. We didn't really get to see much out of Dr. Death either. We talked about what the general idea was, that we all understand, no matter what anybody says, that this was a platform to debut a new character and establish a credible threat, a credible opponent for Steve Austin. The real life Steve Williams versus the real life Steve Williams. It sounds good on paper. Do you think it could have worked? Like if he would have been brought in under different circumstances, could that have worked in the Attitude Era, or was it just bad timing on behalf of Dr. Death?
I don't think it was bad timing. I think it was bad time. You know what? I say correct. I don't think it was horrible timing. I think it was not good timing. You wanted more flamboyant characters, but Doc was a smart guy. Doc got a promo. Doc got over everywhere he had been. He was a legend in Japan. He was a legend in the Watts territory. I mean, Doc drew a ton of money, and everybody loved him. He could work. He could go. The problem that you had in the Attitude Era, one of the problems that Mero had, was that he had a hard time keeping up with a guy like Steve Austin, who didn't. And Doc could have kept up with him. Doc was a guy that he could keep up with anybody. Doc was an incredible worker. Good promo. He had that incredible look. He looked like a freaking gorilla, which he was. I mean, he was an All-American in football and wrestling in Oklahoma. Doc was a badass. I think Doc would have done incredibly well. He just got handicapped because he got put in the Brawl for All and ran into Bart Gunn.
It's interesting to take a look back at this era and think about, just how crazy it is, as you mentioned, that the athletic commissions were not even consulted. And by the way, in the middle of all this, on the other channel, Goldberg is going to be beating Hulk Hogan at the Georgia Dome. So even though it does feel like, hey, the WWF and the Stone Cold era is here and they're number one now, at times you've got to be like, what are we doing? How many weeks into this was it before guys started to really regret it? Because the injuries start piling up. I mean, you can't work a shoot fight. So when guys start to tear knees and everything else that happens, is everybody regretting being in this thing in week one, or does that happen a few weeks?
No. The guys that were going on weren't regretting it because we weren't getting hurt. Not just because we weren't getting paid, we weren't getting hurt. So guys that got to go on, had not been hurt, and so they got to fight again. I remember talking to Bob Holly right before I fought Merrill, I think, or when I fought Draws, and Bob was like, "Man, I don't mind losing to Bart. He had a great fight. Bob's the only one that didn't get knocked out by Bart Gunn. Bob's a tough dude, man. And he said, I just miss not fighting. I miss not being part of the tournament. So a lot of these guys who got hurt obviously regretted it, were doing it. But I don't know if they regretted doing it. They regretted getting hurt. Those of us that were kept going, we were having fun. We were fighting our friends, which we didn't really want to do. But we're training and doing something we had never done before. Nearly everybody in the tournament was enjoying the tournament. It wasn't like, the fans weren't. I don't think. I don't know if they were or not. You go over the ratings and the stuff you get in your your old dirt sheets about what the fans did or didn't do. I have no idea because I was, when you're out there, you're trying to survive against a guy hitting you in the face a bunch, and you're not really listening to him. But I don't know how the fans were reacting to it, but the boys that were in it enjoyed it.
Well, we mentioned that there's no way that these are really a blind draw. Let's talk about some of the matches. We mentioned earlier Steve Blackman and Mark Merrow in round one. Blackman wins, but he's hurt and he's no longer able to continue.
He got hurt in training. He got hurt after the Merrill. He got hurt in training. He was he's sparring with a guy 300 pounds was mimicking me. So thank goodness I learned at baggage claim. Thank goodness that he got hurt and I didn't have to go out there with him in a fight. Yes, every skill he had was better than me. He was better at takedowns. He's better at striking. That'd have been a long day for me.
Henry Godwin drops the bout to you, so you advance, and normally it would have been you and Blackman in round two, the quarterfinals, but now it's going to be Merrow. He's back in because Blackman was injured in training. Savio Vega bested Brackus. Draw somehow wins on points against Road Warrior Hawk. I guess maybe it was technically a draw, but Hawk was injured, so as a result, Draws moves forward. And now we take a look at some different ones. We've got Bart Gunn and Bob Holly. Now, this is another example of why I say there's no chance this was a blind draw. These guys had been a tag team. They'd been brought back as the new Midnight Express, and now they're going to be facing each other. Okay, sure. That's just as likely as Draws and Hawk, but all right, we'll go there. Bob Holly had a reputation amongst wrestling fans as being a legit badass, and I'm sure he was.
He was.
We were all shocked bigger than hell when Bart Gunn beat Bob Holly. Were you shocked? I mean, it winds up being a decision. It's not a knockout, but still, I think a lot of people assumed, well, Bob Holly's going to win this one, and that was not the case. Is this a sellout at the curtain watching these two mix it up?
They all were sellouts. I mean, everybody wants to see a shoot. Everybody wants to see it. I don't care who it is. Everybody wants to see it. So every freaking fight was a sellout. There's no doubt about that. And it's not like a sellout like, we're rooting for Bart or rooting for Bob. Everybody liked both of them. It was interesting to see what would happen. I thought it was a good fight. I know, the dirt sheets and stuff. I've seen some of the stuff you researched that they had panned this stuff, but to us, it was great. I mean, they're in a fight out there. It was fun, and people don't know how hard Bart hit. In hindsight, you look at it and go, my God, Bob Holly did a hell of a job, because Bart knocked out everybody else he touched. So you realize now how hard he's hitting Bob, and Bob's taking all those punches. I mean, Bob's a double tough dude. I don't know if we were surprised. Bob Holly was my pick to win it all when we started. If Shamrock and Severn weren't going to stay in it, and obviously Blackman. I thought Blackman was probably the best fighter out there. But I thought Bob was the dark horse that could win something like this. So, yeah, we're a little bit surprised. I don't think people knew how good a fighter Bart was. We knew he was tough, but we didn't know how good a fighter he was.
And I know everybody looks back at this and sort of, oh, LOL, brawl for all. But let me explain. Bart Gunn and Bob Holly fighting on Monday Night Raw gets a 4.3 rating. Compare that to Nitro that only got a 4.0 rating. It was actually heads up with Rick Martel and Stevie Ray. Then we would see Dan Severn and Kama Mustafa do a 4.4 and then a 4.5. So these are opportunities for them to have really, really big ratings that are actually better than what you're seeing on the other channel at the time. Let's talk about that bracket, though. As we go down, we know that Bart Gunn is going to get the win on points over Bob Holly. Then we see, as you called him, the Pirate. We know him these days as PCO.
Yeah.
Dr. Pierre is going to lose to Steve Williams. This is the first time we get to see Dr. Death. It is a cool look. What did you think of the way Dr. Death presented himself in the WWF? Like when you first see him come down in this sort of boxing style robe, I mean, it's a cool look. I buy it. And I know you were obviously aware of his success he had in Japan. It looks credible. I could see this being a legitimate badass, but I don't know. It just feels like a different time, a different place from the Attitude Era to me. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I agree. And I knew Doc well. Doc and I were really good friends. And so Doc could wear the Hogan's tutu from that ballerina movie and look tough. Doc could wear, I knew how tough he was. Everybody did. Doc was a badass. And Pierre was too. I think we knew Pierre was tough. We didn't know the background of Pierre, Pirate. So I thought Doc looked cool coming out. But was it a departure from everything else? Of course it was. Right in the middle of this match where you've got all this realism, all of a sudden now in wrestling, here's Stone Cold flipping off his balls. He's drinking beer. Here's DX that comes along, around that time, doing all this crazy stuff. And all of a sudden you say, okay, now we're going to take a departure from the fake stuff. This is the real fight. How do you promote that? I mean, it just didn't make any sense whatsoever that, okay, now we're going back to the working fight. And you're going to see, the biggest draw in the history of wrestling, Stone Cold Steve Austin fight somebody, and it didn't make any sense to me. The whole thing didn't make any sense to me.
Well, I don't really understand how to make out this next piece. The Godfather is going to fight Dan Severn, and we know Dan the Beast Severn is a legit badass. We know his certifiable UFC background. We also know the Godfather in real life is like cheap toilet paper. He don't take shit off nobody. This is a hoss of a man. But Dan Severn wins on points, but then he decides, hey, there's nothing for me to prove. I'm withdrawing from the tournament. So the Godfather advances? Like, what are we even doing at that point, right, John?
Was this after Doc had got knocked out?
Yes.
Because after Doc got knocked out, the whole tournament fell apart. And so when you talk about why the tournament was built, that tells you everything right there. This claim from Russo, like I've said, there's no veracity to it. When Doc got knocked out, they had me fight back-to-back nights. They didn't even care. We were supposed to be in Madison Square Garden for the finals. I believe it was SummerSlam or something like that. And I remember looking at it, and when I got past Henry Godwin, and the judges, allowed me to go. I don't know, no idea if I won the fight or not, but I got to go fight the next time. I remember sitting there thinking, man, I've got a path to the final. And if I make it to the final, I'm going to be in Madison Square Garden in a legit boxing match. How freaking awesome is that? For a kid who grew up and watched Frazier and Ali in the Garden, I was 5 years old when that happened. I remember like it was yesterday, my dad and I just remember I thought that this is the greatest thing ever, to be able to box in Madison Square Garden. Well, as soon as Doc got out, they didn't care. They had me fight draws one night. We'll go over that in a minute. And then the next night, Merrill one night, and draws literally the next night. They just finished the fight, the whole tournament. It didn't matter. So after that with Godfather, I don't think it mattered at all to them. They didn't care at this point who was going to win because their guy didn't win.
The last match of the first round fighting is Too Cold Scorpio.
And by the way, let me bring up a quick point here about Godfather and Dan Severn. So now Severn is one of the greatest fighters of all time. He has as many wins as I guess almost as anybody, or more than anybody. I love Dan. He's a wonderful guy, unbelievable tough guy, really smart guy. I mean, real smart guy. He would have figured this tournament out. And he was out there with Godfather. Well, Godfather was getting ready to go out there and fight the UFC champion. Now get this. Now, Godfather, when I tell you he's a crazy dude, I can't love any guy in the world more than I love Godfather. He's a dear friend of mine. I love seeing him. Me and Ron have so much fun with him. He's backstage, and Briscoe comes to me. He goes, where's Godfather? And I said, you don't want to know. He goes, no, he's not. I said, yes, he is.
Oh,
he was back there and he had a joint with his boxing gloves and he's sitting there smoking a joint like this. Like this. He's about to go fight the freaking UFC champion of the freaking world. Severn won that thing when there were no rules. And Godfather's out there with a joint, smoking with his boxing glove. About to go fight him. And then did a great job. He did a great job against, for a guy who's never had like an MMA fight or anything, and he's had a million fights. He is a double tough dude, man. That's a man you don't want to fight. I told you the story about him slapping Ludwig Borga when I first saw him in Germany a few weeks ago. Godfather's a tough dude, but he did a great job versus Severn, but we thought it was so funny. Here's a guy about to fight the UFC champion. He's backstage smoking a joint with his boxing gloves on.
I can't even imagine. By the way, if you're not sure, it's worth a Google. Marijuana is not exactly known to speed up your reaction.
It's great. He's insane. I know you've been around him. He's the crazy, one of the craziest guys I've ever met. Even Ron Simmons will go, that man's crazy. He's crazy. We love him so much, but there's no telling what he's going to do.
Does everybody call him Bear? Everybody inside the confine of the locker room, all the boys, do they all call Godfather Bear?
The old guys do, yeah. The old guys do, yeah. And I got to work with him a lot. You know, we created the Godfather character, me and him on the road together. And so I got used to calling him Godfather. And I always call him Godfather. Occasionally call him Charles. I never call him. I usually call him Godfather. And that's what Ron calls him too. You know, and the reason is people always, wonder about us calling each other by our gimmick names. It's so you don't make a mistake on TV, and call somebody by, their real name or something by mistake. So I knew him. We created the Godfather character together, me and him on the road. He did it with me as the foil. And so I've always called him Godfather, but yeah, Bear was the name that most people call him by.
So listen, the last fight of this first round is 8 Ball, one of the Harris brothers. 8 Ball is, of course, one of the tag team members from. It's not a barrel of cocaine like we were talking about with Godfather with the marijuana in the glove. Name. He's one of the members of the Disciples of Apocalypse. Ben, they had to have a reputation, though. I mean, these are some intimidating looking dudes. Scorpio gets the better of them. Do you have any Harris Brothers stories you can share with us?
Do I ever? Yeah, I love those two boys. They are double tough guys. I mean, really, they are really tough guys. So this is a wonderful story. One of the best stories in the Brawl for All. And I was reading some of your notes, about people that were talking about, the old dirt sheet stuff, talking about the people that were in the tournament. Shamrock and Severn were always claimed to be in the tournament. Now, Shamrock had never agreed. I guess Severn agreed later and then realized this is a really bad idea. There's no reason for a UFC champion to be out here with just a bunch of tough guys who aren't trained fighters, and there's no upside for that. But Shamrock, they always assumed that he was going to be in this fight. So the Harris boy, I remember it's Ronnie or Donnie, they're twins. So it's one of the two. They had one was supposed to fight Shamrock. So back then you had the pay phones, you didn't have the cell phone. So he calls his wife at home. She goes, "Are you on the show tonight?" Now he's not turning the fight down, by the way. He's a tough dude. But he tells his wife, he goes, No, I'm not on the show tonight. He didn't want her to see the fight. So he was going to go out there with Shamrock, but he didn't want his wife to see. So he told her he wasn't on the fight. Well, then Shamrock goes in there and goes, "Look, I have nothing to prove. This is a stupid idea for me to be out here. You're not paying me enough money to go out there and fight somebody in a legit fight. It kills my everything that I've done in the UFC. It kills my pricing points." I mean, Shamrock was 100% right. And Shamrock says, "I'm not going to do it." So then they take out Shamrock and put in Too Cold Scorpio, who's a tough guy, but not the former UFC champion. Well, the Harris boy calls his wife back and goes, "Hey, I'm on the show now." so he told her he's going to be on.
I don't know why that tickles me, but it does.
It was great. He wasn't backing down. He just didn't want his family to see it. He knew he was walking. He knew he was walking to the gallows, as anybody will with Shamrock. And I thought it was a good fight. I mean, it was a good fight. Scorpio, by the way, Scorpio, that dude, there were some tough guys in this. I keep saying he's a tough guy. They were all tough guys. Scorpio had been out all night. All night partying, and he hadn't slept any. He went out there and had a heck of a fight with the Harris boys. It was a good fight,
and he won on points, of course. As we get,
that's right. Scorpio won on points. We were at it was like an autograph session years before, and somebody had said something to, I believe it was Sable. I'm not sure. and Vader told him to watch his mouth. These two guys, and they said something smart to Vader. Vader had just slapped a fan or something within the last year or two, and he had a lawsuit against him. And so Vader didn't want to do anything, and they smartened off to Vader. And Vader may not have wanted to, but them Harris boys did. Them boys beat up half the crowd in the autograph session. They piled over the table. Me and Wyndham piled over. It was a heck of a little Donnybrook. And back then, nobody got arrested. You know, we literally got into a fight with a bunch of fans in the autograph session. And when it stopped, just continued the autograph session.
Okay, now everybody file a single form.
That's right. Okay, guys. All right. Anybody who's conscious, get back in line, and we'll get back to the autograph session.
Now,
I think those Harris boys would go. They were good. They were good dudes. They were fun dudes. I like both those guys.
The quarterfinals. Let's take a look at what that looks like. We've got Mark Merrow and Bradshaw. We've got Savio Vega and Draws. We've got Bart Gunn and Dr. Death. We got the Godfather and Scorpio. We actually see, though, Bart Gunn and Dr. Death happen before any of the others. July 27th, this is when the thing comes apart. Of course, you first had your match with Mr. Godwin a month prior. We're at the end of June 29th. But now here we are on July 27th. When Bart Gunn knocks out Dr. Death, take me to that time, that place, backstage. You're all watching on a monitor. You're peeking through the curtain. What's the reaction amongst the boys in the office saying, oh, I don't know what they had planned, but it wasn't this?
Yeah, we knew that. I think it was in the pond, right? I think it was in Anaheim Pond or in the Staples. I can't remember. It was in LA. I remember that. Or San Francisco. Maybe it was San Francisco. Because I remember we were sitting in the Elephant Bar, and the Elephant Bar was a restaurant in San Mateo. It was like right by the Marriott, and across that was the World Gym that was right across the street. We used to all go to the World Gym. They had this big jacked up lady, the bodybuilder. That's where Balco was headquartered, by the way.
Okay.
And I was always surprised that none of our boys ended up in the Balco scandal because we all worked out at that gym where the freaking steroid factory was. And I guess, look, it just seems natural that you had some stuff that would help you do stuff and was helping all these baseball players that, one of our guys would have figured that out. But either nobody did or nobody got called. I'm not sure which one, but we're sitting at the Elephant Bar, which is right down from the Marriott where we always stayed when we flew in to work the Cow Palace or anywhere around San Francisco. It was in San Mateo. And this Elephant Bar, it was a bar, but it was a restaurant, nice restaurant, kind of on the water. You'd see the planes coming in and landing. And we're sitting there with Bart Gunn and Bob Holly was there. There was a bunch of guys, probably 7 or 8 guys there. And Bart says, I'm going to knock out Dr. Death. And we all just started laughing, not because we didn't think he could do it, but because somebody said, yeah, you're going to be fired immediately afterwards. Right. Because we all knew this whole tournament was for Doc. And so when people try to revise history and say it was about something different, that doesn't fit with what happened. And so we're all sitting there and we're all laughing about it. And they said, they're going to fire you. And he goes, well, I guess I'm going to get fired. And we were all laughing about it. And then we go down to, I think it was LA. I can't remember. It was in California somewhere when he had the fight. And we're watching it and going, oh, my God, this guy has got a shot here. Talking about Bart, which is hard to believe because Doc was such a legend. Yes. I mean, Doc was – and this one, now, again, taking nothing away from Bart. If he had a 28-year-old Doc, not a 38-year-old Doc or whatever his age was at the time, this would have been an even better fight. And Bart may have still won. But it was a different Doc. It was an older Doc. And when he knocked him out, it was shocking. The boys that first popped, then we kind of felt bad because we liked Doc too. We popped because of the association with JR, and we knew that this was the guy that they were wanting to push. And anytime the company wants to push somebody and it doesn't happen, the boys are kind of happy about it because the boys feel like they got something over on the office. And the boys popped, and then we thought, yeah, you know what? It kind of sucked too because look at that picture. I mean, here's this legend, this Dr. Death, who's done so much for the business, who's paved the way for so many of us, and there he gets knocked out in a stupid shoot fight tournament he should have never been in.
It's got to be just sheer panic amongst the WWE executives at the time because no one could have predicted that. And just 1 week later, we see Godfather pick up a win in points over Scorpio. But the week after that, it's Savio Vega and Darren Drozdoff. Of course, Droz gets the win there. But I really want to spend a few minutes talking about your fight with Mark Merrow. Of course, it was supposed to be against Steve Blackman, but Steve is injured. So yeah. Merrow advances. What do you remember of your fight with Mark Mero?
About some really intense training. I mean, I trained my ass off for that fight. I mean, I didn't tell anybody I did. I didn't. If anybody asked me if I was training, I wouldn't tell them. You know, it was the old Stan Hansen deal. You know, I'm just gonna show up and fight. I was training my ass off every single day. We were working at the time, so I'd work on the weekends. I'd come straight home, and I would drive every day to Dallas, right there in almost downtown, where the Ken Shamrock had a Lions Den, and Guy Mesger was training. Guy was a 4-time kickboxing world champion. I trained my ass off. I mean, I trained mostly on takedowns. I knew I couldn't box with him. This guy is a professional level boxer, but I knew I could take him down because I had strength on him. And so I trained for, I don't know, however long it was. I trained every single day really hard for this fight with Merrill. Now, the difference was Merrill trained too with Ray Rinaldi, and he had a better takedown defense for me than he did for Blackman. Now, it didn't matter for Blackman. Blackman could have done it anyway. I couldn't. So I'm sitting there thinking, I know I've got to take him down to win this fight because I know I can't stand up with him. And also, right before the fight, Shamrock and Guy Mesger told me, said, do not try to stand up with Merrill. He will knock you out. And I said, I'm just, when you're young and haven't been knocked out before, you're like, nah, come on, man. Can't nobody knock me out. You don't think it can happen, especially because Merrill wasn't a big guy. He wasn't like a Bart Gunn or a Godfather. I thought, man, there's no way. So right before I left to go to the fight, I was there with Guy. And by the way, at one point, Guy goes, man, you're getting better. I had a bloody nose. I had a black eye from training. And I said, how do you know I hadn't hit you in a week? He goes, you're getting closer, John.
Oh, God. What a great line.
You got to be kidding me. So right before I left, Guy pulls me aside. He goes, listen to me. I've talked with Kenny, and he said, don't try to stand up with Merrill. Promise me you won't. And I said, okay. And he could tell I was lying. He said, okay, here's what I want you to do. When you stand up with him and you realize that you cannot stand up with him, before you get knocked out, start taking him down immediately. And I said, okay. And that's what I did in the fight. I went out there with him, and boxers know angles. And I could see the punches coming from Merrill, but I couldn't stop him. I blocked every punch with my face. And I'm sitting there thinking, holy shit, the guy was right. I can't stop his punches. And I didn't know if they were hurting me or not. I was in good shape, and I'd warmed up a lot before the fight, so I was pretty, heated up, which you get knocked out when you're cold. And so I was taking the punches, but you don't know how long you can take those punches. And thank goodness Guy told me that, and Ken told me that too. And so when I started taking those punches, I realized, shit, I got to start taking Merrill down. And that's when I started shooting on him and just taking him down every round.
Were you at all relieved when you find out that, you're going to be fighting Mero instead of Blackman? Would your training have changed at all? I mean, obviously there's no good option there. You got a Golden Gloves boxer and a legit badass and Steve Blackman.
Yeah.
Would you rather fought Blackman, or are you glad you fought?
No. And I would have fought Blackman. I was supposed to, and I would have. I certainly would have gone through it. I'd have gone through it with Shamrock or Severity. Whoever they put me up against, I was going to go out there. And if I got knocked out, I eventually got knocked out in the finals. That's what happens. I wasn't. It wasn't. Whatever they put me out there against, I was going to do. But yeah, I preferred Merrill because I didn't have any skill advantage over Blackman. Blackman was quicker than me. Blackman had better takedowns than me. Blackman had better hands than me. I mean, every skill in fighting, Blackman was better than me at. And I may have had strength. He was a strong guy and I had reach, but that doesn't help you that much. When a guy's that quick and knows what he's doing. And so when Blackman was out, then I had Merrill. I thought, I got a chance now to win this fight. I thought I could stand up with him. I was stupid. I had no idea he was that much better than me in boxing, and how much difference a good boxer was than just a guy who had been like me in a bunch of fights. But I knew I could take him down. And so I knew I had a chance against Merrill.
I wish you guys had something to celebrate back then.
Yeah, we did. That's APA approved medicine.
There you go. Hey, let's talk about, when you see these replacements. We mentioned that Dan Severn's pulling himself out. So, whoever he fought moves forward. That's the Godfather. We also see that Steve Blackman's been injured in training. So whoever he fought moves forward. That's Mark Mero. There was a draw there with Draws and Road Warrior Hawk. Hawk is injured, so Draws advances. Why weren't there alternates, John? Was that ever even discussed or considered?
Yeah, there was. There were a lot of alternates, and I hate to even mention names because I don't want to, guys have to answer this on the internet. But there were a lot of guys mentioned as alternates, and for whatever reason, it didn't happen. They just kept putting guys back in tournaments. But yeah, there were alternates mentioned. A lot of guys didn't want to do the brawl for all, from what I understand. And so there were alternates mentioned, and they just thought, we'll just put these guys back in. It's the easiest thing to do. Again, after the stuff with Doc, nobody cared. I mean, nobody cared, Conrad. They took it away from Madison Square Garden and just ended up in Philadelphia with the finals. After Doc got knocked out, nobody cared about the tournament anymore.
I do want to ask you, because you're saying nobody cares, but sometimes when we see in football, if the starting quarterback goes down, well, that creates an opportunity. And when these injuries happen, it does create an opportunity for someone to step up. We're going to maybe make a superstar out of this backup quarterback, and maybe he'll be the starter. Was there nobody in the wrestling circle who was thinking, hey, well, since Doc didn't win, if he was really going to win this thing and work with Austin, maybe if I win, they'll give me a shot at that same push? Or did you just know that's not the way it works? That's not going to happen.
We didn't know, we basically at that point, we just knew we were the guys that were in it were having fun. We're training and having a fight. The guys that were out of it were hurt, and so they weren't even working. They not only weren't in the tournament anymore, they weren't working on the house shows or TVs because they got hurt. So they lost pay from all this. I mean, it was a terrible, bad thing to happen to almost everybody on the roster. I'm one of the lucky ones that got through it, that didn't get hurt and didn't get hurt character-wise or anything else. I was very fortunate. Merrill back in. I think Merrill really looked forward to it because he knew he couldn't match up with Blackman, with the takedowns. I think he thought he could match up pretty well with me, which he did. And so he really trained hard with Ray Rinaldi. That's who Bart Gunn traded with later, and really worked on his takedown defense and being closer to the ropes. I could tell there was a huge difference because I'd watched that fight many times, scouting him for takedowns, and I've been working on him so much in the Lions Den that Merrill had really gotten better at doing that. It was a lot harder to get to him.
So, of course, you pick up the win on points over Mark Miro.
Yeah, and let me say right quick, Con, if you don't mind, the fight with Merrill had some controversy to it. Not much. Merrill thought that he won the fight, and, a lot of guys, in close fights think they win, and I'm not the judge. So I didn't say I won it. The judges were the ones that passed me along. But what happened is it's very simple with the scoring, and this is why it was a tie. You got 5 points around for taking people down. You got 5 points around for winning on punches. So we had 3 rounds, and I won every round on takedowns. Merrill won every round on punches. So it's even 15-15. There's no other way to score that because of that. So we had to go an extra round. And Conrad, I've never been that blown up in my life. I mean, in my life. It sounds like you can go through 1 minute rounds. Try doing that in front of 15,000 people against a Golden Gloves boxer. I was so freaking tired. When they announced it was a draw and I had to go an extra round, I'm literally thinking, I don't know if I can make it. Literally, I thought, I don't know if I can make another round. And I knew Merrill had a great hook. And so I'm sitting there thinking, man, if I can just get off this stool late, or I don't even know if I was sitting down, or if I stand up, but if I come out of the corner late and with my hands down and act a little more tired than I am, maybe he'll throw that hook. I said, that's the only shot I got to win this thing. And I said, if he does, I'm going right under it, and I'm going to take him down, and I'm just going to ride him. Lanza had told me backstage, kid, if you get in trouble, ride him. Just take him down, which is not legal, but take him down and don't let him up very quick. Kill the clock, essentially. So, and I'm sitting out there, and I had my hands down just like I did, like I was really tired, and I was exhausted. And Merrill, thank God, threw that hook just like I was hoping he would, and I went right under it and took him down. That's Jerry, take down, yelled the thing, and I rode him for a while, long enough that when he got up, he got a little flustered, and he tried to take me down, which is the one thing he couldn't do. If he'd have kept punching me, we'd have been tied forever. I wouldn't have lasted another round or two. There's no way. I was too tired. And fortunately, when he tried to take me down, I got in some punches on him. So I had him in the corner and just hold him and got some punches in. I saw the score sheet afterwards. They showed me the score sheet, and those punches were what set me over the top to win the fight in overtime against Merrill, was because he got flustered when I took him down, rode him for a while, and then he tried to take me down, which is something he did surprise me because I didn't think he would try that. But, I was pretty strong back then, pretty big guy, and I was good at sprawling. So I sprawled out on him and was able to ride him a while.
We haven't spent any time talking about Danny Hodge, but what do you think about his role in all this? Of course, he's a great close personal friend to JR's, and if this really was a vehicle designed to set up Dr. Death, and Danny Hodge is there first as the referee, later as a scorekeeper, maybe this is JR's baby on some level, but do you have any Danny Hodge stories you can share with us about him, just personally or as a referee or scorekeeper?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story about Danny Hodge. As far as Danny stretching me one time, we were in Oklahoma, me and Barry Windham, and we had a day off, and I don't know why, where we were, but I'll go to Stillwater, Oklahoma, and we got the old Polaroid camera. And so I'm going to take a picture of me pissing on the Stillwater city limit sign and the Blackwell city limit sign, Briscoe's hometown and his working hometown. So I'm taking a picture of behind from a Polaroid camera. Me and Wendell spent all day doing this. We took a picture of me pissing on the state sign, all this different stuff, all in Oklahoma. So I'm sitting there and we're taking this picture. And by the way, the Sheik comes by with Rikishi. We're in the middle of the country. And Sheik always thought my name was Brad Shaw, 2 names, Brad Shaw. So when he sees me, he says, Mr. Shaw. And I'm out there, I'm pissing on the city limit sign. Barry Wendell's behind me with the Polaroid camera. And he says, is everything okay? And I said, oh, yes, Mr. Sheik. I'm just pissing on Briscoe's hometown. He goes, Brad, you're such a fine boy. And he drove off. that was it. So the next day we come in with all these Polaroids, and I took a picture of a toilet bowl full, and I put that up. I put that up, and I put Briscoe family reunion on the toilet bowl. Then I put all these pictures of me pissing on Briscoe's city limit sign, his hometown sign, his working sign, the state sign. It took me and Wyndham all day to do this. I am so proud of myself. I got it all up in catering. It's so great. I got this whole montage about me pissing on Oklahoma. I mean, literally, legitimately pissing on Oklahoma. I'm so proud of myself. So I'm sitting there in catering just waiting for Briscoe to come in. He's going to stretch me. He's done it a million times. It's nothing new, but this time I'm really going to enjoy it because this is the greatest thing I've ever done. And I'm sitting there and I'm waiting in catering, and in walks Danny Hodge and Jack Briscoe.
Oh, goddamn.
And I'm in the back of catering, and I thought, this is the worst day of my life. They're going to kill me. And they're absolutely, because I knew Jerry would not kill me. I knew he'd just beat me up and stretch me, which he'd done a million times. He did it to Bruce too, did it to everybody. I didn't know if Jack would or not. I didn't know if Jack would kill me or not. I'm scared of Jack because I didn't know Jack as well. I knew Jerry. I knew Jerry would eventually have pity on me and not kill me. I didn't know if Jack would or not. And I certainly didn't know about Hodge because Hodge used to ride with Akbar. Akbar told me this. I mean, all those legendary Hodge stories, I've heard every one of them, everything. Hodge was the man. And as they see it, I'm like, oh, my God. And so I try to sneak out. I try to get out the door where they're at, and they stop me. And Danny goes, you think you're funny? And I'm like, no, sir, I don't. I really want to leave. Can I go? And he goes to shake my hand. And when he does that Hodge grip on my elbow. I'm literally down to my knees. I thought he broke my arm. I could not bench press or work out for about 3 months. He stretched me so bad in catering that day. I mean, Hodges, I've never felt a grip like that. That grip, where he'd squeeze these oranges, or squeeze these apples.
And pliers. He could just break pliers, just one after another.
He used to take a steel belted radial tire and squash it like this. I mean, Hodge was legendary, but I felt it. And I literally could not do anything for about 3 months. He tore up my elbow so bad. I thought he tore something.
So Bradshaw beats Mark Mero on points. Draws beats Savio Vega on points. We know that Bart Gunn knocked out Dr. Death. Somehow the Godfather advances past Scorpio on points. And so now
in a good fight, by the way. That was a great fight with Godfather and Scorpio. They fought their ass off. They'd both been out all night. I mean, both of them. And those guys, that was just a fight between two tough guys.
Our semifinals are here. It's Bradshaw and Draws, and then Bart Gunn and the Godfather. I know your boys with the Godfather, and before you faced Bart Gunn, he did. What do you remember about Godfather and Bart Gunn?
It was a great fight. I mean, a great fight. Godfather took so many fights. I mean, so many blows from Bart that would have knocked out a freaking elephant, knocked me out. And it was a hell of a fight. And then when Godfather fell, he got hurt bad. I mean, it blew out his hamstring, everything. I mean, it was a heck of a fight. I didn't know who would win. I thought Godfather would win. Again, we didn't know that Bart could hit like that, until obviously he dropped Doc, which people were shocked about. But when he dropped Godfather, we realized, man, this guy is a different level than the rest of us. And it was very concerning. People realized at that point that this guy's got a punch that is not common.
It's pretty crazy to see, what happens with Godfather here. It's even written in the newsletters at the time that officials were pretty concerned for the Godfather because he was knocked out for so long. And I guess we should all be a little concerned for Savio Vega. For better or worse, this is really the end of him in the WWF. He's going to come back to the ring in Puerto Rico as one of the top stars for the IWA. But as you mentioned earlier, this really does almost no favors for anyone. But before we get to the finals, we should talk about you and Draws. That's your semifinal matchup. What do you remember of your fight with Draws? And do you have any Draws stories you can share with us? Of course, sadly, he's no longer with us, and he had that terrible accident with D'Lo a couple of decades ago that forever changed his life and probably D'Lo's.
Yeah.
But you actually got to mix it up with Draws before all of that happened. What can you tell us?
Draws and I were good friends. We both played football. He played at a higher level longer, and we were good friends. And I was good friends with Draws, until he passed away. What a wonderful human being. I mean, just a good dude. Ends up in a wheelchair. Here's a guy who loved to hunt, do all this stuff, outdoors, and ends up in a wheelchair and doesn't end up bitter. I mean, what a wonderful guy. And I'd fought Mero the night before, and again, when Doc went down, they just went through the tournament. They had me fight Draws the next night. I mean, I didn't get a week off. I didn't get nothing. I had that extra inning fight the night before. And then we were somewhere around Iowa. I can't remember where it was. And then the next night, I had to fight Draws. Dude, I'm exhausted. I'm freaking wore out. And, me and Draws the whole day. Again, you understand, we were having fun. Draws is running around. I go, keep running around. You're going to be tired. It'd be better for me later. And Briscoe came up to me because Draws was a very tough guy and a good fighter, but he wasn't a trained fighter. And he would throw a real haymaker punch, and it would spin him all the way around. And Briscoe was telling me before, and he goes, John, if he does that, get him from behind and take him down. Briscoe was trying to show me some stuff, to get through the fight. So, I might have a chance. And Draws hurt me. I got Draws one time pretty good with a jab, and I could see in his eyes I hurt him. And then right afterwards, I thought, oh, good, I'm going to push him now. And brother, he caught me with one. And I just remember, I sure think, brother, that bell can't come quick enough because that man just rocked me. He was a strong, tough guy. And again, like the other fights, they were all against tough guys. And, the judges passed me along to the next round.
I got to ask, when that it's now the finals, I mean, you pick up the win over Draws, and now you're in the finals, but you're in there and you're going to be in there against Bart Gunn. He's become a bit of he's the star of the thing at this point because of this devastating knockout. We never thought we would see a man the size of Godfather just laying there. Like, what the hell happened to this dude?
And a legend like Doc laying there.
Yes, absolutely. So we've seen two devastating knockouts at this point. So I'm sure everybody's wondering, okay, what does this mean for the finals? You mentioned earlier, allegedly, this was going to happen originally once upon a time in Madison Square Garden at SummerSlam.
Not allegedly. They're going to have it in Madison Square Garden is where they're going to have it.
I mean, that makes all the sense in the world. Instead, we know it happens 6 days ahead of time. It's at the Go Home episode for Monday Night Raw in Philadelphia. Yeah. There's a huge crowd there, 14,727 fans. And on the Go Home for the pay-per-view, it's you and Bart Gunn in the finals. Your week leading up to this, are you doing anything differently in your training? What are you hearing from people? What was your strategy for Bart Gunn?
I didn't think Bart would try to take me down at all, and I didn't plan on taking him down at all. I just wanted to have a fight, and I wanted whatever happened to happen. I wanted it to be exciting, and I didn't want us to try to get technical about it. I just wanted us to have a fight. And so the training led up to it. I didn't worry about takedowns. Guy was my trainer, and word is just all about boxing and all about throwing hands. And I was in terrific shape, and I thought I was in a good position. Obviously, I wasn't. I didn't know, Bart could hit that hard, and I didn't know my jaw couldn't take it. I'd never been knocked out. I'd never been hit like that. I'd been hit really hard by guys, but that was just a different level. It's like they say, 100 guys will punch you, 5 will break your jaw and 1 will knock you out. Bart was that one guy that would knock you out.
It goes 42 seconds here in the finals in Philadelphia. And it's talked about at the time that the winner is going to get a $75,000 check and the loser is going to get $25,000. Michael Cole is pushing how tough everyone involved in this is, of course. But 42 seconds, goodness gracious. What do you remember about waking up and looking around? Are you in the backstage area before?
Yeah. I don't remember anything after. I don't remember getting hit. I don't remember getting hit the first time. I can't remember who the referee was. It was it was a kid out of Philadelphia. I can't remember, blonde hair. I think it was. And I remember telling him before the fight, and because people say, why did the referee let you continue? He let me continue because I told him to let me continue. I said, unless I'm dead, you don't stop this fight for no reason whatsoever. I said, I didn't want any controversy. I wanted to go out on my shield if that's what happened. And I didn't want anybody to stop anything and people think it was a work in any way. So I went out there. I thought I was doing well. Bart was rocking me with some punches early. And when he did, it was moving my whole body. I remember feeling one of them in my ankles, and I thought, my God, he's hit me hard. You know, it is strange. It doesn't hurt. You just know your body is taking something that you probably can't take very many more of. And then he caught me with a punch in the temple, and that's what dropped me. I don't remember anything else. You know, I've seen the fight since, mainly because your guys posted on the internet all the time. That's the punch right there where he knocked me out. But now I got up from that, but I was out. They should have never let me get back up. But again, I told the referee under no conditions, if I'm alive, don't stop this fight.
Was that Jack Doan, do you think?
Jack Doan, that's right. Good young guy. Good young guy. And Jack did exactly what I asked him. You know, some people that say, oh, he should never let the fight continue. He did exactly what I asked him to do. Went back out there. And of course, he don't want to. Bam, bam, I'm done. And I remember waking up in the dressing room, and I thought I'd won. And I see Bart. And Bart's a wonderful guy. You know, they had to yell at Bart to get away from me because he was concerned about me because he had knocked me out. You know, they had to yell at him over the headset. Bart, get away from him, raise your hands, and, you know, get your hand up. He was concerned about me because he's a friend. And I just remember seeing him. Then I realized, oh, shit, I lost. And I just told him, hey, congratulations, brother. You're better than me, and good luck. I remember going on the phone and you know, calling home, and Pat Patterson comes by and goes, this means nothing. This means nothing. Don't worry about it. It means nothing.
Well, it means you're getting a big check. And I'm glad that you got the big check, and I'm glad that Bart got the big check. I do want to ask, though, because Bob Holly wrote in his book that he had heard rumors that you and Godfather were asked to take dives for Bart once he knocked out Dr. Death. Is there any truth to that whatsoever?
No, I've heard the rumor that people thought it was a work for time limit or something. I'd love for people to believe that because it wasn't a work. But no, I can't speak for Godfather, but to my knowledge, that wasn't true with Godfather. And, you know, I'd heard that from a lot of people. They thought it was a work, the last fight for TV time limit and all kinds of different stuff. It wasn't. 100% it wasn't. He knocked me in the next week. Knocked me out so bad, they let me drive the car back to the Philadelphia, I guess, Airport Marriott. And I forgot where I parked the car because I was still out. So I had to find it the next morning because I didn't know where I'd parked the car. So, yeah, he knocked me in the next week.
By the way, the idea that the Godfather piece of business was a work, I want to remind everybody that he's out because he's hurt. He suffered a broken foot, calf, torn knee ligaments, a torn hamstring. He's a complete mess, and he's going to miss months and months. And this is an era when if you don't work, you don't get paid. Yeah. Do you know, did the company try to take care of these guys? I mean, none of them signed a contract to have shoot fights. So if they're going to be on the shelf because they did them a favor and did a shoot fight but got injured, do you think JR was putting a little extra cheese on their Whopper to take care of them?
I don't know. I would imagine that they did, but I have no knowledge of that whatsoever. See, I didn't get hurt. You know, I got knocked out, and they had me on the show the next day or whatever it was, next weekend, whatever it was. You know, they didn't know how to treat concussions back then. You know, I probably should have been off for a while, but they had me on the shows right away. And I was lucky that there was no injuries to me other than, you know, getting knocked out on global television. but I didn't miss any shows, so I don't know because I didn't have that problem. And, you know, they made it to me right away. They put me over on some shows. You know, you could tell they were trying to take care of me.
We know that we're going to see Bart Gunn be presented his big Golden Glove trophy, if you will, for winning this whole shooting match. Why don't you think that we ever saw the company do more with Bart Gunn? We're going to talk about what happened at WrestleMania, but this was a vehicle allegedly that was designed to platform Dr. Death. But Bart Gunn's been with the company for a long time. He'd been a tag team champion for a long time with Billy Gunn. He had come back, got a fresh coat of paint with Bob Holly and Jim Cornette. But the next time we see him, it's going to be when he's working on training camp shows in the Northeast against a guy named the Mongolian, and then a young upstart named Andrew Martin, who would eventually become Test. But he's not immediately put on TV and presented as a badass. That feels like a missed opportunity. And respectfully, it feels like maybe some wrestling politics, or is there more to it than that? Am I being a conspiracy theorist there?
Wrestling politics as in how? Because he beat Doc?
Well, like, I know this wasn't the plan, but if the plan was to try this with somebody else to establish them as a credible threat, we don't need any more credibility than he just laid out Bradshaw and Godfather. He's knocking dudes out. Like, how much more credible do we get? Let's try something, but they did literally nothing.
Yeah, and I never understood that. Bart was, listen, in the first conversation, I told Bruce, I said, you're going to have a guy win this thing that you don't plan on winning it. And that's exactly what happened. They got somebody that they didn't know what to do. I mean, exactly what you thought would happen at a shoot tournament is something's going to be unpredictable. That happened. And all of a sudden, Bart knocks out the whole freaking roster except for Bob Holly. Everybody he faced, 3 big, tough guys. And you don't have anything to do with them because there wasn't a plan for it. I mean, again, once Doc got knocked out, everything just happened like the dominoes went like that. You were done. I mean, you went from being this big thing at SummerSlam in Madison Square Garden to, okay, you're just going to do it in Philadelphia and we're going to put it on Raw. Not a big deal.
I do want to ask you about what's coming. Of course, we know that he's going to be at WrestleMania and he's going to be in there with Butterbean, but there was lots of discussion about another UFC name. Not just Dan Severn, not just Ken Shamrock, but hey, what about this Tank Abbott fellow? And Tank Abbott was an early star for the UFC. This was before we would see him in WCW, but he had a crazy distinctive look, known for being a knockout artist. And I mean, it looks like he just rolled right off a bar stool. He just had this aura about him. And there was rumors in the newsletters at the time that, hey, he might be coming in for a brawl for all. Had you heard that Tank Abbott might be involved at some point?
Yeah, they asked me if I'd fight him. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. They asked me and Bart both right before the fight with Bart. They said, if you win, will you fight either Tank Abbott or Butterbean?
Okay.
So, yeah, 100%. Yeah. They already had the 2 guys' names. They didn't know who was going to accept between Tank Abbott and Butterbean. They may have thought it was going to be, maybe both. And they called me right before it. They said, would you fight Tank Abbott or Butterbean? And you got to understand, Connor, as crazy as this sounds, we had guys who played athletics on a very high level. We didn't understand the difference then between big, tough guys and big, tough guys that were trained professional fighters. And as crazy as that sounds, you do now, about how much of a difference it was level-wise, not toughness-wise. Now, take bench press like 600-something pounds. He was a freak in nature. That guy was – so was Butterbean, though. I mean, Butterbean, the best 4-round fighter in the freaking world, man. I love watching those guys. And so they asked me, so would you do that? I go, well, yeah, what a freaking honor it would be out there. I didn't care if they killed me. I didn't care if they knocked me out in the handshake. It didn't make any difference to me. I thought, yeah, if I can get by Bart somehow, I'll happily do that. And then whatever happens, and I'll be out there with a couple of legends. I thought that'll be wonderful. They would have killed me, but like unfortunately happened to Bart. But yeah, I readily agreed to it.
It's interesting to think about, how this almost came to be. According to the Observer, it's written that Bart Gunn and Tank Abbott in a brawl for all rules match was being discussed in December of '98. But ultimately, those plans fall through because I guess Tank was asking for $55,000, and the WWE didn't think that was a fair number. But I guess there's even talk with other UFC stars, not just Tank Abbott, but even Chemo. And of course, we know that it winds up being Butterbean. And there's a deal that's signed, allegedly a 2-fight deal for $50,000 per fight. What do you remember about hearing that Butterbean was coming in? And does the financial piece of that make the locker room? And how do people feel about that? That, wait a minute, this dude's coming in to fight for $50,000 and we were just doing it for $2,500. What the hell?
Well, no, we weren't doing it for. We were doing it for $5,000 a fight, but now the final was $100,000 split, so the money made a little bit of sense as far as that. But we weren't making big. The $5,000 we were getting for fights, that's more than we were getting for any pay-per-views. I mean, that was big money back then. I made my first year in wrestling. I made $77,000 in '95 and '96, my first full year, and that was working 250, 300 shows a year. I mean, that's not much money once you take out taxes and road expense of that much time. We paid for our hotel, our car, our food, and all that stuff. You know, it was more money than I'd ever made, by the way. Love that $77,000. But when you add on to that, what I got in the Brawl for All of $40,000, I mean, I made 50% more money without any extra expense. You know, that was huge amounts of money for us. And so the 55 was a big chunk of change, but I think realistically in line with what they paid for the final match.
I'm just fascinated by how this story evolves to where Butterbean comes in. I mean, this was never supposed to happen. Of course, this was, we all believe, was supposed to be a vehicle to launch the death or the career of Dr. Death in WWE. But when he finds himself on the outs, they don't do anything with Bart Gunn. As a matter of fact, the next time we see him is when they, in 1999, very early in the year, have him wrestle Bob Holly for the hardcore title. And that's when Butterbean interferes, and that sets up the WrestleMania moment. You know, that knockout at WrestleMania is one of the most famous knockouts in WWE history, maybe even pay-per-view history.
Yeah.
Even Butterbean talks about it as being the fight that a lot of people know him for. That and that alone.
Yeah.
When you're watching on a monitor and you see this guy who knocked you out, knocked Godfather out, knocked Doc out, I mean, goodness gracious. But just like that, Butterbean turned his lights off in one of the more brutal fashions I've ever seen. How's that received in the locker room? And do people feel like maybe they've lost trust in the office, if that's even the right phrase? Like, it feels like Bart Gunn got railroaded.
I think he did. And I told Bart afterwards, you know, same thing when I got home, you know, after the fight with Bart, my dad told me, he goes, when you went down last night, son, I went down with you. And one of the coolest things my dad ever said to me. And it was it's so poignant, you know, to say something like that and have that much, you know, wisdom to say something. And I told Bart the same thing. And I felt the same way. You know, I felt like I went down with Bart because I was pulling for him so much. We all were. And nothing against Butterbean. Butterbean's a super nice guy. I mean, what a wonderful person. And Butterbean, from what I understood, had offered to work it. I mean, Bruce is a better contact on that than me, but Butterbean, you know, he had told me after the fight that he was willing to work it. You know, he couldn't believe they were going to have a shoot fight. Butterbean told me after the fight, because we talked to him, you know, Butterbean's a super nice guy. And, you know, he was the villain, obviously, to us because Bart was our guy, but Butterbean was a super nice guy. He went to the WrestleMania party afterwards, and he said, hey, man, he said, this guy hits apparently like a great heavyweight. He said he was never going to touch me. That's right there. That picture right there is where he's setting up, where he ducks his head and throws that overhand right where he's not looking. That was Butterbean's best punch, where you duck the head right to the left shoulder. There it is coming right there. And then you throw the overhand right where you're not looking at it. And that's where he, you know, caught him with that incredible knockout. Butterbean told me, he said, I've had 100 pro fights. He said, this guy was never going to touch me. He said there was no chance that he had. So right before the fight, I don't know what's going to happen. And again, you know, they told Bean we want it to be a shoot. Bean couldn't believe it that it was going to be a shoot. He was willing to work it. From everything I understand, Bean was willing. That's what Bean told me too, was that he was willing to work it. And he couldn't believe that it was going to be a shoot. Right before the fight, me and Shamrock had snuck over to watch Bean warm up. And so we'd sit there and watch Bart warm up. You know, we're fight fans, you know. So we're sitting there watching Bart warm up, you know, the pads. You know, he's killing his pads. But then we go over there and see Bean. Brother, it was a different level. I mean, he's hitting these pads and just pow, 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 pow. And he is hitting them so freaking hard. He's knocking the guy's arm back. And I'm sitting there looking at, you couldn't see us. We were like, you know, little kids, you know, hiding, looking. And I turned to Kenny. I said, oh, my God. I said, Bart doesn't have a chance. And Kenny said, this is going to be a bad night. You could just tell the difference in a pro fighter and just a big tough guy was complete quantum leap. And that's what you saw in the fight.
So listen, I got to ask you, you know, what's the consensus amongst the boys in the backstage area when they see a guy like Bart Gunn go down? I ask because even Bob Holly wrote in his book that he had overheard Doc say to someone that he had been paid the Brawl for All prize money in advance. Like, this was so designed for him that allegedly that was a way to justify maybe giving him a signing bonus or something like that. Have you heard that before?
I'd heard that, but I don't know if that's true or not. And I'd heard that, you know, Bob said that. Some other guys had said that as well. So it obviously came from somewhere, and it may or may not be. I don't know if it's true or not.
We got to mention what Bob wrote in his book. He says Steve Williams had no idea what he was letting himself in for. He didn't know Bart. I spoke to Steve about it later in the year, and even he said it was a really bad way to do business. If the boys are told they're going to go out there and fight for money for real, they're going to do what it takes to win. If management wanted a specific result, they could have just told us what they wanted. Yeah. Instead, they basically wasted nearly $500,000 and ended the careers of both Bart and Steve Williams. A lot of other guys got injured during the Brawl for All too, so it didn't really do anything for ratings. It just wasn't worth it. Everybody thought the whole thing was a very bad idea. The WWF learned from that and never tried it again. That's what Bob Holly wrote in his book. What do you take about? What's your takeaway from what he wrote? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think it was a terrible idea. You got to throw in Henry Godwin also with the neck, with Savio Vega with the neck. I mean, you had so many guys, their careers were over from this. I mean, you ruined careers because of this. This was a horrible idea. And by the way, Steve, Dr. Death called me before the Doc fight and before the Bart fight, so he Godfather, and said, brother, you have no idea how hard this guy hits. He said, these are tough guys telling me this. I'm like, come on, he can't be that bad. He was that bad, by the way. Yeah, it was just a horrible idea, and then you end up with nothing with it. You know, the whole thing was preposterous as far as all of a sudden we're going to create this tough man out of here. Okay, well, if that guy's tough, well, what is Stone Cold? You know, it doesn't make sense to me that, no, he's a legit tough guy. Well, is Steve a legit tough guy? Well, yeah, he's a legit tough guy, but it's a different tough guy. The whole thing just didn't make any sense. And, you know, the whole thing I went, you know, like I said, I've never addressed all these Russo, you know, preposterous claims all these years. I just hate that Russo goes on and tries to rewrite history and make it about me, because it wasn't about me. You know, it was about what I've just told you. And the whole thing was one of the worst ideas in the history of wrestling. I mean, nobody came out of this good. Me and Godfather are probably, I guess, the only ones that came out of it decent. You know, I got a pretty good run as JBL and then as a commentator and all that. And Godfather got a great run, you know, also. Everybody else got hurt and almost got done from this. I mean, it was a horrible idea. And you brought in Doc with all this pomp and circumstances. If Doc was what they thought he was, and I think he was, he would have drawn a fortune with Stone Cold. A fortune. And this cost our company a ton of money by doing this thing.
Hey, I want to ask you, you know, the narrative has been out there for a long time that people, well, they speculate, maybe that's the right word, that Butterbean was brought in really as punishment for Bart Gunn because he beat the golden child, Dr. Death. Do you buy into that? Or do you think
I think Butterbean may have even intimated that in an interview as well. And I don't know where he got that. He obviously got it from somewhere. He didn't make that up himself. And so I don't know if it was or not. I mean, all of a sudden you end up with, they didn't know what to do with Bart. And so I guess they just put him out there. And by the way, we thought Bart was going to win. We all did. In hindsight, it shows you how stupid we were. We didn't know the difference between a big tough guy and a great. And Butterbean was a great fighter. Same thing would have happened with Tank Abbott or you know, Chemo or these other guys. I mean, especially Tank. You know, Tank was like Butterbean. He could, you know, knock out an elephant. We didn't know. You know, we didn't know how good a different level a pro fighter was compared to just a big tough guy. We thought Bart had a chance, but they had nothing to do with Bart. And so I don't know if it was punishment or not. I mean, you know, it kind of fits the narrative. It kind of fits the narrative if you know, based upon what happened, because what are you going to do with it? And then what are you going to do if, you know, Bart was training with Ray Rinaldi, you know, who was Merrill's trainer, a great boxing trainer. That's who he was training with. You know, came out with the robe, the hammer. And, you know, I think Bart wanted to turn pro is what I think was wanting to happen, you know, because of his success. But again, that quantum leap between great amateur and great professional was much higher than what anybody thought. And I don't know what you do with it. Say he beats Butterbean. What do you do then? I mean, do you bring in Larry Holmes? Do you bring in Mike Tyson? I mean, what do you do then? I'm not sure you have something that fits anymore into even WWE.
It's interesting to think, you know, because even if it's not quote unquote punishment, it just doesn't. Even Bart training and doing a boxing camp, like with the benefit of hindsight, why would you think that you can beat a legitimate pro boxer like Butterbean? Wouldn't it have made sense for him to do more MMA training and just try to take Butterbean down? I mean, I know that the audience is there to see somebody get knocked out. That's what they want. for Bart Gunn and Butterbean. And by the way, they got it in under a minute, so it didn't take long. But in hindsight, if Bart would have been just training for takedowns, he had a shot to win the thing, right?
Yeah, and I think look, Bruce is a better source on this, but I think they didn't want takedowns in the fight. I think they wanted a straight boxing match, a tough guy contest. They thought it'd be more interesting. But you're right. Bart trained later in MMA and was pretty good. He wanted to fight Butterbean again. It never worked out. To fight him in more of an MMA type setting. Because Bart, like I did as well when I got knocked out by Bart, took it pretty hard. And, it really bothered him. I was with him when he watched the tape for the first time, and he was just heartbroken. I felt so sorry for him because I like him so much, and what do? You get hit by a punch that your head can't take. He trained for some MMA after that and wanted to fight again, but it never worked out.
Guy W. Johns on Twitter wants to know, he says, Bruce said he considers this to be one of the all-time worst ideas. What's your opinion, John? Is this one of the worst all-time ideas?
I don't know how it couldn't be, because I don't know. I mean, I'd be interested to know. You're a historian, Conrad. I'm interested to know your thought on it. I don't know how it couldn't be.
Everybody got hurt. No careers were advanced. A totally bad idea.
Yeah, and nothing happened good out of it.
Not one thing.
The problem was we weren't young guys. That's the biggest problem that there was with this. If we were 21-year-old guys, it'd have been different. Guys wouldn't have got hurt. Henry Godwin had a broken neck, and he was out there. And this pretty much ended his career because they put him out there, which he could have never passed a physical. You put Pierre out there with one eye. I mean, it was stupid what they did. We weren't young guys. We were older guys who had a ton of injuries, just like Doc. And so we were guys that were damaged goods going out there. This shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened at all. That being said, I had fun in the fights. I had fun training. I knew how dumb it was. And I think history is going to show that this might be the dumbest idea in the history of pro wrestling.
Man, Ho-Ho Husey has a fun question for you. John, why did you wear your ring gear? Not everybody did this, but you did. Did you consider wearing anything else, or is it just like, hey, guys, this is my TV stuff. I'm going to wear it.
That was it. It was my TV stuff. I remember before the match with Draws, I said, hey, I told Draws beforehand, we were good friends. I said, I'm not going to shake your hand after it because I'm going to stay in character, for it. I just won't let you know because, you're supposed to shake hands before the fight. And I walked off and wouldn't shake his hand. Of course, the announcer made something of it, but I was being a heel with it, So that was just part of I didn't know what else to wear shorts or whatever. So I wore Billy Gunn's tennis shoes for the fight against Bart and gave back to Billy. And I said, Billy, you're the one that fucking sabotaged me because that was your old tag partner.
James on Twitter wants to know, could there have been a better way to pay off the Brawl for All rather than feed Bart Gunn to Butterbean? Is there a way you think after the fact to do something different with Bart? Like, have you put any time or effort or energy, or did any of the guys, or did everybody just sort of know, hey, this is punishment. He's being railroaded. They don't want anything to do with it, because it does feel like, man, there's a million different ways to go with it, right?
Yeah, there was. I thought after Doc got knocked out by Bart, I thought what they should do, and I pitched this to the company, that they should send Bart over to Japan and do some, work shoot fights, some of the UFWI type fights, and have Bart kill a bunch of people, and then have Doc go over there and do some of that stuff, without gloves and all this stuff, because Doc could have done that UFI stuff in his sleep, and create some type of what looks like a shoot fight, like Shamrock did with the Lions Den, that he did with Owen, and I think he did with Blackman, and create some type of working UWFI type fight out of this, but build this up a while based upon what Bart has done. I thought they could have done that, but they just didn't seem to have any interest at that time of doing anything with anybody.
Michael Stutler's with us live here from adfreeshows.com, and he says, after all that time has passed since Brawl for All, do you wish you hadn't taken part in it, or do you see it as part of your legacy?
I got to fight in a fight tournament against really tough guys, and that's cool. I grew up a boxing fan, and I never dreamed I'd get to do anything like that. I got to put on gloves and go out there against really big, tough guys and be on worldwide television and fight in a legit fight tournament. And that's pretty cool. The outcome wasn't what I wanted. I did get through 3 fights, which your social media guys tend to forget when they post stuff. But, and then I got drilled by Bart. But those things happen in fights. So no, I don't regret it at all. It legitimately, and again, I got my first home out of it. It's one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I did okay in it. I got beat in the finals. I got a good paycheck, and it was so much fun. It really was. Training in the Lions Den, I'd never done anything like that. I always loved training, for football and for wrestling, and I loved the training. It was something so new to me and so different that, how you figure out all these different mechanisms to take a guy down, to get angles on punches and things. It was a lot of fun. And so, no, I don't regret it at all. I regret the finish of the last match, but somebody's going to beat you.
Something else you won't regret is joining us at adfreeshows.com over the weekend. I had a chance to catch up with Sam Adonis for an exclusive series we call Learning Lucha, where you learn about some of the more influential families in the history of Lucha Libre. And we've got a clip about the Guerrero family from Sam Adonis at adfreeshows.com.
As far as the Guerreros, they were staples of both sides of the border. And I think Eddie came along towards the tail end of that territorial success and really was the one that kind of was able to learn from his brothers, pick up the who's, what's, where's, and why's from every small town and every show he did. And he was at the right place at the right time for the wrestling to just become a global phenomenon. And I think that's why he's so vastly respected and so damn good, is because he's one in a million. He's the only guy that learned every part of everything. And that's, a lot can be said about that because, he learned the ins and outs of Lucha and then spent the time in New Japan learning the ins and outs of Japan, learned the territories with his brothers. And I think, without Eddie Guerrero, we wouldn't be where we are today as far as having the Lucha influence all across wrestling and having, so many Mexican stars on TV each week. I think, you just look at the story of that whole family and how it, I guess the worst analogy would be calling it a family tree, but it truly is a family tree because it just, it keeps growing out in every direction and you can see its influence everywhere. And, it all comes back to Gory Guerrero.
Check out our Learning Lucha series, along with 100,000 hours of exclusive content you can't get anywhere else, from legends like The Godfather, who went pretty viral last week for telling some stories about Sonny. Tully Blanchard, can't wait to talk to him about Tessa Blanchard showing up over the weekend at the TNA pay-per-view. Lex Luger has been making some headlines because he's been working with DDP, and you can talk to Lex about that. I just recorded with David Crockett last weekend, and we talked all about October of '86. That is indeed the month where Magnum TA had the tragic accident. It's also where Dusty found himself backed into a corner. And what do you know? He became, and I can't believe this is real, Nikita Koloff became a babyface. We talk about all of that, the Horsemen attacking Dusty in the parking lot, and so much more as we get ready for the Night of the Skywalkers. We even talked to Mr. Crockett about that infamous vignette with the Road Warriors throwing the pumpkins off the scaffold. Man, if you just can't get enough nostalgia, you're going to love adfreeshows.com. More than 100,000 hours of bonus content. You get all of our panel discussions from every StarCast we've ever done. You get to be a part of live Q&As. You get to join us for watch-alongs. But bigger than all that, you get to be a big part of our big community. And right now, we want to give you a promo code, Wrestle25. If you use that at checkout, you'll get 25% off your first month at adfreeshows.com. That code again is Wrestle25, and you'll get 25% off your first month at adfreeshows.com. By the way, it starts at just $9 a month. What are you waiting for? Go check out adfreeshows.com. John, that'll cover it for us this week on Brawl for All. Did we get it all? Is every stone unturned? Did we miss anything?
I think we got every stone. I was just thinking, one of the things that was so bad about the Brawl for All was we're not trained fighters. And so if you want to see good fighters, you'd watch the UFC, you'd watch boxing. You're seeing these guys who are big, tough guys who are telling you are the best fighters in the world because we're professional wrestlers, and that's our character. And then you're seeing the lack of skills that these guys had. That's one other thing that I thought that hurt credibility of everything, except for like Blackman and Shamrock and Severn. Guys didn't have great skills. And so I just thought the whole thing was such a terrible idea. And speaking of Godfather, I saw the thing he did with Sonny. Godfather's, you got to have him on every week. I was there for the Sonny. I said, where's Sonny? I don't know. She got a shit-eating grin. That was the joke that.
Oh my goodness! You don't want to miss it.
I had nothing. I had zero to do with it. I never did anything like that. But I was there for the whole thing.
But I heard X marks the spot. So check it out. By the way, if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Go hit the subscribe button at somethingtowrestle.com. Turn on your notifications bell. That's your home for all things Something to Wrestle. That's somethingtowrestle.com. And we got to make some decisions next week, John, because I've got a few things queued up. We could talk about commentary because you're in a unique position. Not a lot of people have ever worn those headsets and heard Vince McMahon on the other side. We've heard other people talk about it, but we've never heard you talk about it. We've also never talked about the tribute to the troops. I'd like to do an Ask JBL before the year is up. What do you want to do next week, John?
It's Tribute to the Troops. We had a lot of fun on there. Some great stories from it, but commentary is good also. I think Tribute to the Troops, to me, because of Christmas coming up, would probably be good. We had a lot of fun over there. We had some incredible stories and had a lot of fun with, what I consider heroes, our soldiers that are out there doing a, pretty rotten work in a pretty rotten place, but doing it for the right reasons. The commentary stuff, though, I had Vince in my ear for years. And Vince was the only guy he talked to a lot of times, was me, Cole, and Kevin Dunn. So I got to hear a lot of stuff that, there's a lot of things about this that aren't true. And the true stuff is wilder than the fiction that's out there. It's completely different from what you think. I never had a problem with Vince. It's going to be, once we discuss, I think people are going to enjoy it. I hope they do.
Well, that's what we'll do then. We'll go ahead and do next week, Tribute to the Troops. We'll close out the year talking about Vince McMahon on the headsets, and we'll kick off 2025 with an Ask JBL Anything. Get those questions coming in right now. You can find us on social media at Pritchard Show on Twitter and Instagram, Something to Wrestle over on Facebook, and of course our YouTube is totally free, and that's somethingtowrestle.com. John, thanks for all the time today, man. But I'll be honest, I'm looking forward to next week. Can't wait to do it again, talking all things Tribute to the Troops. Right,
I got a great story about me and Ron Simmons where bombs are going off everywhere, and Ron goes, I'd have mailed them a fucking autograph.
I can't wait for next week. We'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield.